Hey, welcome to Tana Central, the podcast where we talk all things Tana, our favorite productivity app. And in this episode, we talk about our frameworks, our workflows, a bit of AI, a bit of our hacks to make the most out of this amazing tool. Just wanted to let you know that if you're watching this on YouTube, usually our episodes do have video, but you know how it goes, technical difficulties. So this is going to be an audio only episode. So this is a good time to announce that we are now available to listen on Spotify, and soon we'll take over all the podcasting apps. You can join our community in the description to know when we're available in Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcasting app. And again, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can definitely expect next episode to have video again. But until then, I hope you enjoyed today's show. All right, so welcome back, guys. We're doing podcast number 3, and we're here in Twitter Spaces. We had a lot of technical difficulties, but we sorted it out. So yeah, it's gonna be cool. It's gonna be a good show. We're gonna be talking about obviously the latest things in Tana. But yeah, how are you, Nick?
I'm good. Looking forward to taking our rabbit to the vet later, and hopefully he's doing just fine. But otherwise, in the Tana space, just looked at the release notes from yesterday. Didn't notice anything huge, nothing that's going to shatter the earth or anything, but some nice fixes for importing to Roam
Right.
and some other fixes, especially with grouping of tags and stuff. But yeah, really minor quality of life stuff for the most part, it seems like.
Yep. Nice. Good stuff. I was curious, why do you think they're putting such an emphasis on like the import in Rome? I mean, do you think it's like that is something essential for a lot of users? I mean, obviously it is so that people can literally move from Rome to Tana. How do you perceive the importance of that feature? Is it massive, you think?
Probably not massive. This to me feels like something that, like everything is important to some degree, but this feels like something that isn't as important as a lot of other things. They have time to catch up on a backlog of things like importing from Rome and stuff that is not necessarily a critical part of the experience within Tana, but super useful for anyone who is transitioning from a different product.
Yeah, no, obviously, like there's people who really want that feature, so I definitely see why they consider it an important thing. Maybe it's just something that I haven't really felt the need for. I don't think I ever made use of any of the import features in Tana because when I moved to Tana out of Obsidian and out of like other tools like that, I never really needed to import it all. I'd much rather start fresh, to be honest.
Yeah, I have a bit of that myself too. We've kind of talked about that before where I didn't really even have any ideal system before really going into Tana. But even if I did, I would rather have full control over how I'm leveraging super tags and all these things because it's a completely different way of optimizing and thinking about all of your notes or whatever you're importing from these other systems.
I know what you mean. Like at the end of the day, I think the problem of importing all of your notes from somewhere like Notion or Rome is that then you also bring all of the paradigms and all of the way that you think about a given tool, and you bring all of that baggage with you into Tana. And I think that can stop you quite a lot from actually really understanding Tana. You just kind of try to adapt your previous workflow inside of Tana, which I found to be detrimental for a lot of people. Obviously, there definitely comes a point where you might want to start importing things, and I don't think it's a bad feature to offer for sure.
hmm
But I always recommend against day one importing. I don't think that's a good idea at all. Yeah.
I totally agree. Even if you do end up importing, I would recommend for at least a week, if not longer, just operating within Tana and familiarizing with yourself and really going step by step too. Like understanding how you're going to tag things and then understanding how fields interplay with super tags and then understanding live queries and how those can supercharge your super tags and everything. Because what I see a lot is just people getting overwhelmed by all of the possibilities. And if you don't understand all the individual aspects, you're going to really struggle with how to apply them all together.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Tana has like some things that I don't think any other tool has. Specifically, I believe super tags is one of those things that I can't think of any other tool that has something like that. Can you?
No, that's definitely one of the things. I think also you can do searches, but they're not quite as powerful and flexible as what you can do in Tana. And then those two combined with the ability to do commands, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, commands. That's a good topic that we wanted to talk a little bit about. So first off, for people that might not be familiar with like the particular commands inside of super tags, can you describe them real quick?
Commands can exist outside of super tags actually, and you can just like bring them up using the command line,
Right.
or you can just go to the original node as well and run them from there. But I think typically the primary use case is going to be you insert them as part of a node. And so let's say you have a task super tag and you have a few commands like push out the date 1 week, or you change the status using a command that you can just push using a button. So those sorts of things both increase the power of what you can do. And it also makes it a better end user experience so that you don't have to think and search out like, I want to change the status in this field or something. You just
Right.
click a button and you're done.
Yep. Perfect, perfect. Maybe there's a bit of a terminology confusion sometimes that some people might face with like there's a command line, right? So the thing that you activate with is it Command K on Mac?
Yep.
Yeah, so
Yep.
Command K, I actually changed the shortcut to just like backslash. It's just a bit faster. But Command K, like you can open all of the functionality that Tana has. But then the commands that we're talking about, it's also called commands, right? Like the name is the same.
Yep.
Listen, yeah, okay, that's a bit confusing. So yeah, the one that Nick was referring to for anyone that might not be familiar, that one's just a really nice feature where you can automate certain aspects, like just like Nick was saying, maybe you want to change the status of something, you want to change another drop down that you have in there, you want to just do a bunch of things in bulk, just automation. You can configure things so that with the press of a button, like Nick was saying, you can automatically change a bunch of things. You can update things. Nick actually came up with this really cool system last week because we send a lot of voice notes for the work that we're doing with Tana Central. And yeah, I'll let Nick explain it, but it's really cool stuff. So yeah, Nick, explain how that works. It's really cool.
It actually started, I wanted to be able to track conversations that we were having with people, with clients and everything, so that we could both have visibility and just have quick summaries also of those conversations and who we're talking to and everything. Right now, it's very manual and I'm copying, pasting messages that are going back and forth using that. But I was able to provide quick summaries so that I know, oh, we talked to this person about that thing. That's what he does. Okay, cool. But then I realized, what if we could apply this to our voice notes that we send back and forth to each other? And so I used the same logic for summarizing the content to our voice notes, and we could have entire threads of discussions. Yeah, I had one command for summarizing, and then you brought in your own ChatGPT logic that you've been using on your own, inserted that into another command for bullet points as well. And we have two buttons now, one for summary and one for bullet points. And there's some rough edges to work out, but
Mhm.
it's an amazing first draft of a communication system that can happen in the same place that we're doing all our other work.
For sure. And I mean, there's tons of things there, right, to break down. Like one is the aspect of commands to kind of have a button to automate things. But then, of course, within commands, what's really awesome about Tana is that it does allow to bring AI. We can use GPT and the power of that, the power of OpenAI, to automate things and to just kind of use artificial intelligence in order to process information. So, like Nick was describing, like we have these voice notes, and that's also leveraging that really cool feature that Tana has, which is the ability to record your audio and then having the right click transcribe feature that allows you to transcribe using Whisper. And like that transcription just by itself, I think is incredible. It's the best way to do it. And Tana makes it super easy compared to other methods, right? And then implementing the AI in the commands, it allows us to not only record voice notes that have like the best possible transcript, but on top of that, use a command automation with just a press of a button to use AI to summarize things given our instructions, right? So like Nick was saying, we have one to summarize like the whole voice note in a, short sentence or two, and then another one to create bullet points because that to me, like the communication that we do back and forth, we do send like long voices to each other, right? Like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, sentence more. And those was one of the most efficient ways that I found is like literally just having AI create bullet points of everything with the indentations, which obviously Tana is capable to do, and just covering points by points when formulating a reply. I'm really impressed how like just that workflow, and we can keep improving. Like you say, like there's definitely some aspects to improve, but it can make communication and collaboration so much more efficient compared to previous methods where I don't know, like I mean, just imagine emails back and forth, right? Like that's a pain. And now that voice notes, I believe, have become a little more prevalent, for communication between teams. Having a way to not only use AI to have better transcripts, but also using AI to have summaries and bullet points, and not just that, but having the power of data to organize all of that within one place and with the press of a button creating those summaries. So I'm just blown away by all the layers of really cool stuff that is happening there all at once.
Yeah, this is something that I've struggled with for a long time is I realized what are these different ways that we communicate in meetings or asynchronously in Loom videos and whatnot? And I realized a while ago that when you write things out in Confluence or Notion or whatever for someone else to digest, that is maximizing the fidelity of thought on your end, but also it's minimizing the effort on the other person's end of, okay, how do I understand what's going on in the smallest amount of time possible? Written is best for that. But
Right.
audio is best for me to just kind of dump out my ideas and speak out what is in my mind to someone else. But then audio format is more difficult for the end user,
Mm,
the listener, to be like, okay, so
yep.
now I have to think about everything that was said and order it, do my own kind of bullet points and everything, come up with
Right.
my own action items. But this flow that we're working on is hitting at a possible way to get the best of both worlds of minimizing the friction of me dumping out my thoughts into an audio note, but also minimizing the friction for you when you're listening to it, if you even choose to listen to it, of having the bullet point summary and action items to take away from that message that I sent to you.
For sure. This opens like so many new ways in which people can work. And I'm a huge fan of asynchronous communication, right? Like you and I, we send a lot of voice notes, we send also videos, screen recordings. And I love that way of working because sometimes it's just kind of tricky to find a time to meet, right?
Hmm.
Also when meeting sometimes, like there's a lot of I'm not gonna say time wasted, right? It's not like something that should be avoided. It does make sense sometimes, but I believe asynchronous communication systems that can be developed with voice notes and screen recordings do end up being a lot more efficient because not only can people have more of the freedom of like, okay, I'll listen to this once I have a chance. They don't need to be present there in the moment,
Hmm.
like
Yep.
canceling other commitments or just rescheduling things. It just allows that freedom for people to organize their time in a better way. But on top of that, the level of efficiency that I think it's brought is so much better because just having the transcript, right? Just having the transcript of that and it being able to use AI to organize ideas. I think I haven't really found any better way of doing things that literally that method that we're working on. The level of asynchronous communication through audios and screen recordings, but then adding AI to that, and then on top of that, automating it a lot more with Tana. If Tana would allow to replace Slack, for instance, that would be incredible, or Asana, because at the moment we're still kind of refining our process, but like the work that we're doing is very heavy on like Slack. So Slack is where we kind of go back and forth, almost just like a normal chat application, but it has channels, it has some good features. But then Tana to send voices at the moment, as well as organize all of our knowledge, all of the things that we're working on with courses. Nick kind of has like this massive structure, all organized in Tana. It's super cool stuff. So Tana is like a knowledge base that we're kind of trying to hack into some sort of like communication device, then Asana to keep track of tasks. So once Tana allows like those features to bring the strengths of something like Asana, which is really good for project management, for task management in collaboration, which already has some features that we can definitely leverage more. And that's definitely something we're going to keep improving over time. But then what it has like the ability to chat inside of Tana and have a notification system, even as basic as one in Notion. Notion doesn't have anything too fancy, but it works and people can somehow comment there and somehow communicate there. Definitely looking forward to Tana bringing those elements of Slack, those elements of Asana, and it's going to be a killer tool for collaboration once it does.
Yep. I am 100% expecting us in our work at some point this year. I actually think in the next 6 months, maybe even 3 months, that we will have a Tana system that absolutely replaces Slack and Asana for everything that we're doing ourselves.
That'd be great because at the moment, obviously, like the more features that the official Tana can launch and release for us and for anyone that wants to do workflows like this, it's amazing. But at the end of the day,
Mhm.
Tana is definitely so flexible. We can definitely hack our way into certain workflows. So, for instance, the task management, I do see for sure how we could somehow replace Asana already inside of Tana because Tana does allow us to keep track of task management. Perhaps like the only small annoyances would be like the mobile experience that isn't quite there yet, the notification system that isn't really implemented. But if we maybe combine that with some version of Slack, just kind of let the other person know, like, hey, check this out. I got it in Tana. I think there's already ways in which those things can be developed, right?
Yeah, I think it could be done already, but
Yep.
there would be a few missing features
Yep.
and some aspects of it would be pretty clunky still. And
Right.
so I believe that there will be updates in the coming months that will really help us avoid some of those clunky aspects and they will add in those features that would fill in the remaining gaps.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I remember you talking about how if Tana becomes a 7 out of 10 in a lot of different areas, it becomes a much stronger tool because it allows us to implement several workflows. Like if it replaces Slack, perhaps it won't have as many features as Slack or as many integrations, which is one of the advantages of Slack with Zapier and so on. But even then, just having like some basic way in which communication and notifications can happen, even just to the level of Notion, ideally a bit better because yeah, Notion still isn't like a full communication tool. I really dream of a tool that can allow us to keep track of essentially those three things: knowledge, communication, and project management. I see a lot of potential for Tana to become that tool for sure.
Yep. I see no reason why it can't happen, which means I think it will happen. It's just a
Yeah.
matter of time.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I wanted to ask you, I remember that you were doing your newsletters. Have you continued that? I forgot to ask you about that.
When I was just kind of experimenting with
Yep.
things last year, last summer, I
Yep.
was writing on Substack, which
Hmm.
technically also functions as a newsletter.
Yep.
Besides that, I didn't actually do official like newsletters. I was going to start it up at some point for the strategic design business, but I didn't get that off the ground yet.
Right. Gotcha. Gotcha. I
Why?
mean,
Why
yeah.
do you ask?
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna ask because when it comes to like that sort of long form writing, which yeah,
Mm.
like Substack, I think is a definitely a good tool for that kind of stuff. For long form writing, have you ever been able to figure out some workarounds, some ways in which you actually write like blog posts slash newsletters inside of Tana, or is that still something that you use some other tools for that?
Yeah, I guess I used other tools,
Right.
because even though hypothetically having a series of nodes,
Right.
that's basically a bunch of paragraphs or something,
Paragraphs. Hmm.
uh, but it doesn't quite feel the same. And when you paste it into an actual written format, even if technically the paragraphs and everything are correct, you realize that it doesn't look right. It doesn't feel right. So yeah,
That's a good point because now there's headings, if I'm not wrong. I haven't really used it
there
much,
are.
but the
Yeah.
headings kind of solve a big problem that a lot of users have been having for ages, myself included, right? So, yeah, it's a good point. To be honest, I guess I could do that. Just gotta have it bullet points be paragraphs. It just feels wrong. That's the reason why I haven't done it. It just
Do
feels
you think
wrong.
maybe it's just a mental block or
It
just
could
a
be.
visual block?
I mean, now that you say it like that, it's like, oh, just notes or paragraphs. I'm like, oh,
Uh-huh.
you're right. Because in my ideal case scenario, I really want to start using Tana for long form writing. At the moment, I
Mhm.
still use Obsidian because it's just kind of a bunch of benefits. Obsidian's designed for that. It's just meant to replace something like Microsoft Word, Google Docs. Like
Mhm.
Obsidian works as a replacement for that, which is how I use it. But Obsidian doesn't have databases. I mean, yeah, you can hack your way around it. You can use some plugins that technically there's some features that does allow kind of like Notion based tables, that kind of stuff, right? But
Mhm.
Dana is just perfect for that. Like it's a built-in feature, like databases, tables, just filtering
Have
stuff.
you
So good.
have you
Yeah.
tried it
Yeah.
sounds like you haven't, but have you tried using basically each node as a paragraph, but then
Right.
ton of publish, you can turn it into a page and then
Yep.
the bullets can disappear and you can do basically a print preview. And you could even copy and paste from that ton of page then into whatever you're actually writing in.
That's a really good point. I think I've done that for emails, but for whatever reason, I didn't do it for yeah for blog posts or newsletters. So I'm gonna give that a go. Honestly, once I added headings, I was like, okay, this is a step in the right
Mm.
direction. Yeah, like you say, it might just be a mental block at this point, like because especially with Tana Publish, technically I could copy it out because that was the biggest problem. Just kind of like I write it all in Tana and then I want to copy it out. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's a good point. I'm gonna try that. I made a video. I can't remember how long ago, but like maybe 6 months ago, I made a YouTube video about like hacks for doing long form writing in Tana. But yeah, it was back before Tana Publish. There weren't headings, so just very hacky. It just didn't work out that well as a long term solution. It was some good ideas based on someone who in the community kind of shared like some CSS hacks that they use. But yeah, I'll definitely give it a try. There's one feature. I don't know if you're familiar with this. There's one feature that Obsidian allows that I doubt it will ever come to Tana, but I just love it. It's called Vim mode. Are you aware of Vim mode?
No.
So VIM. Yeah. So for anyone listening,
Oh,
yeah, do you know the
I
shortcuts?
know of Vim, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So exactly. So yeah, I guess we could just call it Vim, or I think Obsidian calls it Vim key bindings or shortcuts, something like that. But I love that. So like basically there's like the home row as it's called. If anyone has learned about speed typing or just kind of like proper form of typing, you start with your index finger in J and then you go K, L, and then semicolon, right? That's kind of the normal. What Vim does is it just shifts it one to the left. So you just go to the left like this and it starts with H, JKL. And what's so interesting about that is that Vim is a nerdy programmer still, right? But it's been adapted into just a way of thinking about shortcuts. And what it does is that then this becomes the arrows, right? So J
Mm,
goes down, K goes up, H goes left, and L goes right. It's just a way to kind of like navigate instead of having to move your fingers all the way to the arrows. You can just do it all from here.
mm,
And combined with other shortcuts, essentially Beam allows for every keyboard, every key to become a shortcut. So instead of doing Control Shift I, you just press like a letter, right? Things like that. It's a really nice way in which you can navigate text and just, for instance, select the whole sentence, move it down. You press Y, it copies. If you do P, it pastes. It's just
mm,
really fast ways in which you can edit text. And when I was in Linux back in the day, I lived on that, right? Like that was the way that I wrote absolutely. And I had tools for that. But then once Obsidian implemented those shortcuts inside of Obsidian, I was like, wow, this is a killer feature. Like I love it. I doubt Tana will ever bring that. It's just too nerdy. That is one of the things that definitely keeps me writing long form in Obsidian.
mm,
But oh man, I wish that existed in Tana. I don't know if they'll ever do it. It's becoming more popular. Have you heard of like
mhm.
Beam Cal? There's like
No.
this, yeah, so it's kind of like a calendar application, very modern, kind of like Superhuman, which is the one for email. And they are a modern tool that is not for writing, it's just for calendar and events, but they already use the shortcuts as a way to just navigate through events and stuff like that. So I see how it's becoming more popular to use those shortcuts. That idea,
Mhm.
Readwise reader that uses that, which is pretty cool. So yeah, either way, that's my rant on Vim. I love Vim and I wish it existed in every app.
Tana already does a great job of including a lot of different keyboard shortcuts, both
Yep.
for navigation and for selecting and adding elements. But I would like to see even more. Most of the time, especially if I'm in outliner mode, which I might also call builder mode, because that's the fundamental building blocks. Whether you're doing notes or actually building like a task management app or something, you always start in outliner mode. And so when I'm in that mode, I want to be able to do almost everything without my hands leaving my keyboard so that I can build things that later on I'm primarily just using my mouse. Like a task manager, there'll be the different columns that I'm moving things to, and I'm clicking different buttons and everything. And so there's kind of two different ends of the spectrum where when I'm in outliner mode, just building stuff or just writing notes, I never want to leave the keyboard. If I have kind of a finished product ready, I never want to leave the mouse.
Wow, interesting. So is this for the purpose of just making it easier for other users to use, or because you actually enjoy like the interaction using the mouse?
Both. I think unless you're typing words, unless that
Right.
is your main output, usually it's easier to just click and drag or just, click and click. Or the only easier thing than that is speaking, like saying, select
Right.
this, move that, or whatever.
Mm.
But yeah, if you had to do keyboard shortcuts to switch every task card to a different column or something like that, that's a little bulky. So yeah, generally speaking, the easier path to do something is by moving a mouse on the screen.
Interesting. Okay, so I'm gonna have a bit of pushback because
Mm,
when it comes to like cards moving like in a board, right? So it's
mm,
Like Trello type boards or Trello type cards where it's drag and drop. I definitely see how it's satisfying to use a mouse, but personally, I've used a lot of tools. Well, a couple of tools. Not every one offers this, but like I'd much rather use shortcuts even to move across boards. If it was up to me, I would throw the mouse out the window, never use it again. I hate the mouse.
huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I think we have a philosophical difference there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, from the standpoint of just making things more accessible and easier for people, more intuitive, then yeah. And I do see how it's so much more satisfying to grab a card and drop it and just that process be super interactive, almost feeling as like, just having a piece of an object, real life object, and just moving it and following the mouse. Yeah, it's a lot more satisfying in that sense. I agree. It's just, in my opinion, it's just so much faster to use a shortcut just for speed and efficiency. But yeah, satisfaction is definitely something that should be accounted for sure. Just a nice
Yeah,
user
yeah.
experience.
Yeah, I like not being tied to a thing. So, like, if I'm
Right.
typing, I have to be sitting upright and everything.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if I'm able to use the mouse, I can put my feet up and I can just
Uh,
have one hand. I'm like, let's move that there and let's move that
right.
there. That's the value that I get out of it, I guess.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. It does make sense. Like it allows you to kind of change positions. It's not as rigid. And at
Mm,
the end of the day, thinking about it, like there's something about like mouse interactions that, in my opinion, is inefficient, right? But
mm,
it does feel a lot more like real life. I mean, if you think about a mouse, there's something like I was saying, just the ability of like dragging objects. Like what do you what you do in physical life. Whereas keyboards are not very related to real life. It's just a weird thing to think about, like
Mm,
interacting with your world. But there's an interesting thing about like using a mouse and a screen where it almost feels like an arcade game. Like, that
yeah,
classic like claw thing that you go like this. He grabs the thing. It's that kind
yep,
of relationship now that I think about it. So
yeah.
obviously, like touch devices, like phones, tablets, have tried to make it a little bit more like real lifey,
Mm.
kind of touching things. What you touch is what happens. So I wonder if the mouse is gonna stay for long into the future, or if it's actually gonna disappear. I don't know. What do you think?
As long as we have two-dimensional screens, I think the
Right.
mouse is sticking around.
Yeah.
But when we get into, like, VR headsets and everything,
Mhm.
if things like is it Apple Vision Pro? Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
Or,
that's right.
all of
Yep.
these different iterations that are coming down the line, then it's just gonna be we won't even need our hands anymore because it'll have
Mm.
eye tracking, and it knows if my eyes linger on a certain position and I blink twice, I'm opening that thing up? And so
Yeah.
there's so many both possibilities as well as not limitations, but there's certain things that you're just not gonna do anymore if
Right.
we really transfer our work and personal lives into those kinds of experiences.
I know what you mean, and that definitely makes you think about like how people will interact with technology in the future. And obviously, we're moving into that territory with Apple Vision Pro. Like, when Apple brings something to the mainstream, people like love Apple, and everyone that has an iPhone says like, "Oh, okay, it sounds like eventually I'll need an Apple Vision Pro." So it's definitely going to change the way that we interact with things. Right now, I actually think it's very clever the way that they solved it. Like, you look at something in the Apple Vision. I mean, I haven't tried one myself yet, but have you?
No, I have a friend who ordered one, so maybe next week I'll check it out, but
Nice.
I
Oh,
I
that's
do not have one.
Yeah, 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 that's cool. So yeah, like this idea of like you look at the screen in front of you and then use your fingers to kind of like confirm like you're looking at a
Mm,
particular app,
right.
and then
Yep.
you connect your index finger and thumb, and
Mhm.
that selects it. Like you say, maybe later it could be based on like double blinking. That might give you like
That could
weird
be a lot of
twitch.
blinking though, yeah.
Yeah.
If you combine all those things
Hmm.
with AI that does a really good job of understanding your words and your intentions behind those words, then you can just look at something and like, open this, look at something else, open
Right.
that, and taking in all of the data of where you're looking, what you're saying, how you normally give commands for things,
Right.
then the AI can figure out, oh, okay, this is what they want to happen.
Interesting because they have a big important decision to make, like, technology companies like Apple, on what is the correct thing, because now people are just gonna start doing this a lot more. For people in audio,
Mm,
just kind of like connecting like their index finger and thumb, people are just gonna do this randomly through the day, like it just creates this habit. So obviously they don't want to make something weird, like, oh, you gotta twist your head to confirm, and
mhm.
like it's interesting how like this technology is gonna affect like the habits that people have. There's like that phenomenon or kind of consequence of technology where like sometimes our muscles contract in ways that we feel them is like minuscule contractions, right? But now because of phones and the vibration that they do when you get a notification, if you
Mhm.
feel that in your leg, in your pocket, but your phone isn't even there, your
I
brain
get
says,
that
"Oh,
all the time.
notification," right?
Yeah.
It's just a weird thing. So technology changes our physiology, the way that we think of our muscles and our body is weird.
Here's something that's very interesting. I did some consultation for a company that one of the things that they do, because they're working with people with developmental challenges, whether it's autism or any number of things. So they were working on productizing emergent user interface design, meaning that AI adjusts the interface to whatever works best for the user. If you fast forward this through 100 iterations of the technology improving on itself doing that, then we could get to a point where every person has a user interface for everything that they do, not necessarily visual, by the way, it could be anything, but an interface that is completely personalized to them to such an extent that if someone else tries to use that interface, it just won't work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's just strange how like technology just changes the way that we think, right? It's weird.
We kind of went down this rabbit hole a bit last time of
Mhm.
the fact that we have AI that is just such a leap ahead of anything we had before as far
Right.
as kind of self-correcting technology, really. It opens up possibilities on this meta level that we wouldn't have even conceived of before, like 15 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. And this kind of segues a little bit into, I just want to hear your take on this. So I'm developing this workflow that I want to keep improving, and I want to know how much Tana is really capable to do that, because at the moment I'm using just like a bunch of different tools, all linked to AI, but just kind of bringing it back into like PKM and this kind of stuff. So we're talking a little bit about like writing and, developing newsletters, blog posts, any sort of long form writing. And you've definitely made me think how like I can definitely bring this into Tana and just kind of change the paradigm of like, okay, a bullet point is just a paragraph. It's all good. Right. So I'm gonna definitely give that a serious go. Now with that, I have this workflow that I want to adapt. So let me just describe it briefly. I'd like to see if you have any ideas. So the way that I do things is I first have a transcript, right? So I literally dictate the first draft of just like a bunch of ideas that I want to convey in the blog post that I'm writing. I would have like that whole draft. In this case, in Tana might be just bullet points, but the whole idea is that it's paragraphs and paragraph after paragraph, right? Just a bunch of things. Then I want to kind of like instruct the AI to do a bunch of things. I'll try to be brief for now, and then I'll get into more detail. But like the first thing is I wanted to take inspiration from other writers that I like how they write, so that I can use their expertise and guidance to inspire the work and just improve it. That's one aspect. Obviously, I would like to have several sources so that I'm not stealing from one given person. Like they say, if you steal from one person, that's step. But if you steal from several, that's inspiration, right? So that idea. And then maybe having like some framework, maybe some guides, maybe like some text that describes like, oh, use this framework to make a perfect blog post. Just kind of doing some research and seeing a framework that I like and feeding that into the AI as well. And then last, bringing a bunch of my previous blog posts to inform the AI on what type of language I use, how do I express myself, how do I construct my sentences, and so on. And then feeding the first draft, giving all of that to the AI. It uses the inspiration from other authors, the frameworks from other people that have, like outlined the best way to write, and the previous knowledge it has on how I write. And then it gives me a second draft that is so much better that then I can look back into and improve it as I go. So I kind of bring all of my ideas. That's kind of the human element, just kind of bringing like the almost giving the piece of writing itself, right? That's
Mhm.
that's my input, but then using technology to improve the technical aspects of what makes good writing technical, and how can I improve this from the standpoint of like an editor's point of view versus I'm the writer, the AI is the editor, and we collaborate like that. So I have some ideas and I've been working on this system, but I would love to implement something like that in Tana. Tana has the commands, Tana has AI features. I just wonder how much is actually possible in Tana at the moment. What do you think?
Mhm. Tell me in one simple sentence what your goal is, just to make
Yeah,
sure that I'm solving the same problem that you're asking me about.
right, for sure. So the goal is I want to write faster and have expert editor that gives me feedback and ideas immediately. That's
Mhm.
really
Okay. And the feedback and ideas you want, there's several different varieties. Like you want it to be inspired by these authors and you want these kind of technical best
yep.
practices and a couple other things. I think, yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
I think this is perfect for, remember, I think it was the first episode we did where we were talking about AI and Tana. And I was like,
Mhm.
man, what I really want is OpenAI calls them assistants now, not GPTs, but I want a
Mhm.
particularly trained GPT
Exactly.
and assistant. Yeah, because what I would do in this instance,
Mhm.
and we can still do it with what exists in Tana today, but it would be even better if I had explicitly trained
Right.
assistants that came from OpenAI, not trying to do the training inside in the moment of Tana. But anyway, AI is so interesting for so many reasons, but one of them is you see how well theories and how humans actually work well in the real world. And you can apply that to AI. That's how you know AI is actually a good representation of intelligence because the same benefits and drawbacks that come with human intelligence can actually be applied to AI. And that's actually how you can best work with AI. This is a huge preamble to
Right.
saying that what I would do is I would have several different commands
Mm.
and each one has a particular focus. So you would have one command where you're like, okay, reference these nodes where I have pieces of work from my favorite authors. And this is what you're going to train on. This is like the ideal blog writer or whatever.
Mhm.
You would have another agent or assistant that is like, these are best practices for blog writing. And you're going to be like the head editor or whatever. And then there's another one that is referencing some of your old stuff, like, this is my voice and how I speak. and
Right.
then, another one or two, and they all work together, but also adversarially. And
Mhm.
so what I would do is I would have one command that kicks off a cascade of
Yep.
all of these others. And then you can go from there to maybe do some more refinement, like, okay, you all
Right.
work together really well, but let's do another refinement based on best practices because that guy
Yeah.
clearly was sleeping on his job. And then you can do a
Well,
second draft and third draft from there. Does that make sense?
yeah, that makes total sense. I was actually debating this morning. I was working on this. I was doing the first draft and literally laying out everything that I wanted of the system, right? And I was debating whether like doing different passes. So like first draft into second draft, which maybe that is like inspiration from others. Then into the third draft, which is best practices, and then the fourth draft, which is after
Mhm.
it understands the way that I speak. So I was debating like whether I should divide it in different passes or just try to combine it all at once. But it does seem like everything that you said, like there's definitely an advantage to dividing it in different passes, right?
Yeah, I think there's an advantage to both
Right.
breadth and depth. So having a bunch of things in one pass, but then also doing multiple passes of that. And I would have cooperation and
Yep.
adversarial relationships. Now, the cooperation would be between the different types of AIs.
Yep.
The adversarial nature, I would have like your inspirations. And this is where the training of particular assistants would be very useful. So,
Right.
like there's three different assistants that are trained on your main inspirations, and they all have different benefits and drawbacks, and you
Right.
can't decide which one is really best. Well, you have an adversarial network between those three agents, and you say, okay, each of you come up with recommendations and then attack the other agent's recommendations.
Wow.
And then you'd probably have like an observer
Yep.
assistant who decides, okay, I like what you said and you said, I don't like what you said. This is the recommendation from this committee of
Right.
inspiration. Does that make sense? So it gets
Yeah.
pretty convoluted, but this is how I think you can have super powered draftability of your ideas.
Wow. That's really cool. So if I had to choose like between one or the other workflow, do you think it's more beneficial to feed it a draft and then have each one of these different experts in different aspects, each one of them giving me feedback? Or is it actually beneficial to have them create a second draft, third draft, a fourth draft, and then give me kind of like their takeaways? I don't know. What do you think?
It all depends. It depends on how much control you want. It depends on how much you trust your assistants to
Yep.
not like go off the reservation and just come up with something completely different because
Hmm.
they, after four iterations, they actually wrote Terminator 2 when you started out with
Yeah.
Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
Yeah, and it also depends on what you want exactly and how much you think you know what you want. Like maybe
Right.
you're not really sure and you just have an idea. You just want to see where they take it. Maybe then you let them go for five, six drafts on their own. And then you come back and be like, okay, yes or no.
Right.
And it depends on how you work too.
Yep.
Maybe you want a finished product to get a full recommendation, or maybe you want all the details of each particular recommendation.
Yeah.
So I guess I would ask myself all of these questions. And
Mhm.
if I don't know, then I would just start building and then I'll realize, okay, I know the answers to these questions. This is what I'm going to do.
For sure. I mean, really cool stuff. I guess I would like to hear your take on what do you think of the advantages of doing this in Tana versus the two other options that I was seriously considering. One being like just doing a custom GPT assistant, whatever it's called, just inside of ChatGPT, the website itself, right? For OpenAI.
Hmm.
That definitely has its advantages. You can feed it you can upload certain files, meaning that I could give it inspiration blog posts, inspiration of best practices, my previous work, that kind of stuff. So that has its advantages, but it's also limited in the sense that just relies on copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, back and forth wherever I'm writing that final product. Right? It has its annoyances, and there are certain just things that I just can't control. Then the other one, which is just very cumbersome, but I've been willing to do it, which is just developing my own script using Python. I'm not a massive programmer, like I know some stuff, but I've been writing quite a lot of Python scripts just using ChatGPT helping me write the code. And I just tell it what I want. I test it, I troubleshoot it. But it's really funny. It takes a while because if I knew more Python, it would be so much faster. But because of ChatGPT does all the heavy lifting, it takes me a while. But the advantage of that is that I can use the API from OpenAI as well as like some other in Python. There's a bunch of libraries, meaning like almost like pre-configured mini tools, mini apps that do really advanced stuff. So I can literally just put all the PDFs, inspirations in a folder and say, this is where you get inspiration from other authors. This is what you have like a list of best practices. And then there's some tools that you can use inside of Python to create like libraries. And either way, I don't want to get too nerdy right now, but that is extremely customizable and is probably the one with the least limitations out of the whole approach.
Mhm.
But then Tana, especially if I use it as a place where I'm actually writing with everything that you shared about just having every bullet point be a paragraph, using the headings, I see a lot of advantages, and maybe there's even some aspects of it that I haven't even thought about too much. I guess from your point of view, what are some of the advantages of actually doing it in Tana versus the other methods?
I think the big advantages, one would be efficiency because you don't need to do a whole lot of copying, pasting
Right.
in different conversation windows and everything.
Yep.
And also, you can set things up so that it's always going to reference certain nodes all the time,
Mm,
so you don't need to do that. If you set things up correctly, whenever you push the command button or
yep.
whatever your workflow is, it can understand the context that you're working in. You can, bring in the parent node or a sibling node or something. And so that, again, you don't have to copy and paste and you can just run it without thinking. Tana is in the midpoint of customizability. If you're literally writing Python or something, you cannot get more customizable than that. Not really.
Right.
But I also think that, especially once Tana, and I say once as if I know, I have no idea, but I would think they would have to at some point introduce the ability to interact with assistants or
Mm,
something like that. So I'm going to say once they do that, I don't see for 99% of people why you
yep.
would need any more customization than that.
That's good. I mean, I'm gonna be experimenting. I might hit you up like to get your take on certain things. That could even be
Totally.
some interesting content we can do for the channel. So if people are
Yeah.
interested, that's cool as well.
Once you hook up that capability to chatbots.
Wow.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
crazy. No, the potential of this stuff is amazing. I mean, are you liking this trail of thought? I have another workflow that I wanted to see what you think. I'll be brief, and if not, feel free to wrap it up at any point. So okay, there's this other really cool system that I actually did use Python, and I'm very curious to see if this can be adapted in Tana, which is that I have a bunch of transcripts of podcast interviews as well as YouTube videos. I even have some books and stuff like that, right? Just a bunch of information of things that I've consumed that I enjoy. Instead of just taking extensive notes, which is what I've always done, I was like, okay, how can I use AI for this? So what I have right now, and yeah, again, we can maybe make another video showing it. I have like this, it's a terminal window that just opens. So right now it's very ghetto, like it's not very user friendly at the moment. I will improving it, but it's just a terminal window that says like, okay, ask your question. And they literally say something like, what is well? Something like that,
Mm.
right? And it would literally search through the whole database of files, of books, transcripts, and all the stuff that I've consumed that I fed it. And it would give me a smart answer based on that. It would create a new file, giving me a smart answer as well as quotes from the original sources that it found. And that I think is killer feature that I love. And I wonder if that is possible to kind of somehow that you can think of. Is that possible at the moment or not really?
I'll answer in several levels. The first level is I am confident that there's a way to jerry rig something for sure.
Right,
So I bet 100% there's something that you could at least get close to that.
right.
It might take a lot of effort and there might be some gaps in capabilities or the experience, but I bet you could at least get close.
Yeah.
As far as like literally doing that, let's see, leveraging commands with AI and then implementing a search, maybe. I don't think it's quite there for like really accomplishing that, but that's something that we could maybe in our off time dive into and see
Yeah.
if we could build something like that.
For sure. I guess there's some features missing in Tana to really allow it, which is like having a database of like embeddings, which is kind of like a way to kind of synthesize all this information. That's how OpenAI
Hmm.
manages with information. Python had a separate library for that and it's interacted with OpenAI. So yeah, some technical difficulties on like dealing with long text is probably the biggest thing stopping it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And then how do you actually process the results into that
Right.
kind of meaningful, digestible format? I'm not sure how to
Yeah.
accomplish that.
Oh man, I really hope this becomes possible in the future. But yeah, cool. We'll start wrapping it up. A great conversation. I mean, we went down some really interesting paths for
Cool.
sure.
Yeah, before we finish, I'm working on updates to the course. So if we want to do a little shameless self promotion, we are planning on having continuous updates to our course for learning about Tana. So not only will there be updates soon, but there will be a flow of updates over the coming months.
Yes, healer like Nick has been working super hard. This is a massive improvement of the course that we have. So do check that out. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'll leave information to that in the description. This is gonna be the best resource for anyone that wants to learn Tana. It's gonna be killer. Let's start wrapping it up. And yeah, for anyone watching this, we do this weekly. You'll find more information on the exact times in the description. You can join our free community as well, where you can track of when we do these ones, as well as any questions that you have. We can answer them there. So yeah, information for that in the description as well. That's it. We had a great time. See you later, guys. Bye bye.
Cheers.